Hey guys, it's Jenna. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you my December 2017 wrap up and my January 2018 wrap up. I have several things to talk about in this video, so I will keep my descriptions and feelings about each of them very brief. If you're interested in hearing more about them, please feel free to ask me down below or go check out my little mini Goodreads reviews that I do leave for every single book that I read. I try to at least leave a small paragraph if I can. Sometimes I just don't have that many feelings about a book when I first finish it. Sometimes I do. Either way, you can ask me down below or check out my thoughts on Goodreads. So let's just get started. So in December of 2017, I ended up reading 6 books. And the first one that I read was My Favorite Thing is Monsters, which is a graphic novel by Emil Ferris. So I actually didn't end up rating this book. I thought it was fantastic visually. However, the storyline left me a little bit confused towards the end. It went off on some tangents that I didn't really know if I liked. It just didn't connect with me as much as I thought that it would. I read this on recommendation, not personal recommendation, but a general recommendation from Emily over at Possibly Literate. If you know her channel, you know that she is obsessed with this book. And rightfully so, I think. It's a fantastic piece of art. I thought it was incredibly unique, and I would recommend it if you are looking to branch out in graphic novels. If I remember correctly, the entire graphic novel, it's huge by the way, it's about this thick. The entire graphic novel is done with pen, so it's just absolutely incredible the art that can be made with just a hand and a pen. It was incredible visually. The story, not so much. It was just all right for me. The next thing that I read was A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. I buddy read this with Robin over at The Driftless Reader and Kelsey over at Hardback Haven, and we ended up buddy reading this whole series together. We started buddy reading this in November of last year and continued all the way through mid-January, I think. Overall, we really liked this whole series, but this book in particular wasn't our favorite. I think that the first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, was our favorite out of the 3. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I know I'm speaking for the both of them. But yeah, there was just a whole magical competition that was in this book alone that I felt like took the story in a direction that just wasn't as intriguing to me. The magical competition itself was very short, but the build up to this competition was incredibly long. But overall, I liked this book. The competition element was pretty cool. It was just the build up I thought was a little bit too long. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. So with those complaints, I still overall really enjoyed it. The writing is incredible. And the characters, while they're not my favorite characters in the entire world, I can see why other people are obsessed with them. They're unique and fun, and it's just a really cool series. And if you're looking to get into fantasy, this is a good place to start, in my opinion. I would consider this series to be young adult rather than adult. The characters in this are like 19, 20, so kind of borderline between young adult and adult. But just the general feel that I get from this series feels much more young adult than adult. So don't be intimidated by this if you've only read YA fantasy. I think you could definitely handle this. So the next book that I read was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. I listened to the audiobook and I read the physical book. And it's a short and sweet novel that is very odd at times, but very endearing. I fell in love with the main character, Eleanor. She is an adult who lives in Scotland, and she has a lot of, I wouldn't say social anxiety, she just has her quirks. So Every week she goes through her same routine. She goes to work Monday through Friday, and that's completely fine. And then once she hits the weekends, that's when she doesn't really know what to do with herself. So she buys 2 bottles of vodka, drinks them over the course of Saturday and Sunday, and then she's just so excited to go back to work on Monday because it provides more structure to her life. So she's very odd, and you're like, what is going on with this girl? You find out that something terrible happened to her when she was a child, and you slowly get background information on that. And it's kind of an adult contemporary mixed with a mystery, and you think that it's going to be mixed with a little bit of romance, and I won't spoil anything, but I will say that the relationships in this book, while not necessarily romantic, are some of the best relationships I think I've ever read in a book. It was just, the friendships were just spot on. I love the character of Raymond, and it's just a fantastic book. It deserves all the hype that it's getting, trust me. 5-star read for sure. The next book I read was a big disappointment to me, and that was Hidden Sea by Gregory Maguire. This is supposed to be a Nutcracker retelling. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was very disappointing. I thought the writing was beautiful at times, but kind of indulgent in a way that was boring, if that makes any sense at all. It just meandered all over the place, and it's supposed to be, or at least my expectation of it was that it was going to be a Nutcracker retelling. And while it is and it isn't. It's more of a backstory of Drosselmeyer, who is the clockmaker, I believe. Goodness, it's been a little while since I've read it, so it's not incredibly fresh in my mind, but it's really just the background story of Drosselmeyer, and then at the end we get like the short little Nutcracker story. But to be perfectly honest, I kind of skimmed the last about 75 pages because I was just over it. It was just incredibly disappointing, very, very boring. I didn't care about any of the characters whatsoever, and I wouldn't really recommend it, sadly. The next book that I read was actually a short story collection, one of the few that I read, and that is Uncommon Type, some stories by Tom Hanks. And yes, that is the Tom Hanks. This cover and this spine, they're just adorable. I obviously got this from Book of the Month whenever it was, I think it was in November. I can't remember. Yes, November 2017, this is one of the choices. So I ended up picking this because I just couldn't resist reading something by Tom Hanks. So I read the physical book, and I also listened to the audiobook from my library, and he reads the books, or he reads the stories himself. And it was really nice listening to his voice, listening to Tom Hanks tell you a story. That was really nice. But overall, I did give this short story collection 3 stars. It didn't wow me. A few of the stories were cute. Some of them were a little boring, to be honest. None of them blew me away. It was just a sweet little collection, and if you're interested in it, I would definitely recommend the audiobook so you can at least get his voice out of it. And the last book that I read in 2017 was Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. This is a middle grade story, which I ended up giving 3 stars. It was a cute little fairy tale retelling of Snow White and Rose Red. These 2 sisters that live near a forest. They end up losing their father and kind of everything that they own, and moving from their really nice house to a little cottage that's a little bit closer to the woods. And it's just a short and sweet magical story. It was just okay. It started out wonderful, and then we took way too much time. Like, so much time went by in the book where nothing happened. It was just them exploring the forest. And while that was cute to read about, the plot didn't really go as fast as I had hoped that it would. The ending was really sweet, and it was just a really cute happily ever after. I would recommend it if you're looking for a cute middle grade story that is a fairy tale retelling, and it also has some really, really beautiful illustrations. They were all done in watercolor, and it's just my style of illustration. I thought it was beautiful. But those are the books that I read in December of 2017. I'm going to switch over to January of 2018 and tell you about the books that I've read a little bit more recently. Okay, so on to the books that I read in January of 2018. The first one that I finished was The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This was a reread for me, and I gave it 5 stars again. I can't recommend this series highly enough. I ended up reading the entire series in the month of January. I mostly buddy read it with Brittany over at Brittany Freaking Reads, and we both really, really enjoyed it. Had a couple of differing opinions towards the end of the series. She brought up a lot of things that I hadn't thought about after we both had finally finished them. But overall, we really enjoyed it, and the first one in particular is my favorite. It's the start of an epic, or almost epic, adult fantasy series that follows Kelsey, who is a 19-year-old queen that finally takes her throne, and her kingdom is just in chaos from multiple things. There's just so much corruption in her government, and with religion and politics and war that's threatening to happen from all sides. It's just amazing to me, Kelsey's growth. She's one of my favorite characters. I thought she was incredibly smart and witty, and also not perfect. She's very flawed, and she sometimes didn't make the smartest decisions, but she's also 19 years old. So I think I've heard a lot of people criticize the fact that, oh, like she made all these mistakes, or she said this and I didn't really like that. Well, she's 19 years old and she's under immense pressure, and I just felt like she did the best job that she could underneath the circumstances. I really enjoyed this first book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And while the other two, I gave them all 5 stars. While the other two, I don't consider them being like favorite books of all time, I still really enjoyed all of them. And I'll get to the other two in just a second. But this was the first book that I read in 2018, and I'm glad that I did. I wanted to reread it before I read the other two. So I'm glad I finally got around to doing that. The next book that I read was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. Again, I read this with Robin and Kelsey, and this was ultimately a letdown. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I was expecting so much more from this finale that I didn't get. I didn't get a lot of answers. There was just so much meandering with the plot, and nothing was happening. There was just a lot of emotions being talked about. I mean, I honestly think, and I'm not exaggerating, I think about 300 to 400 pages could have been cut from this book completely, and it wouldn't have taken anything away from the plot whatsoever. There was just so much going back and forth, and what are we gonna do, without actually like any decision making. And it was just a little less conversation, a little more action, please, when it comes to Conjuring of Light. That being said, I enjoyed the ending. It wrapped up nicely, but I was just expecting so much more with all the hype that it was getting. And I think part of the reason why I didn't like it was because of all of the hype. You get caught up in all of it, and you're expecting something absolutely perfect, and I didn't get something that was absolutely perfect. I would recommend this whole series. I think that A Darker Shade of Magic was the best, and then it kind of gradually went downhill. And I think this may have been one of those cases where the writer, V.E. Schwab, I feel like she may have been just under a lot of pressure with a bunch of deadlines, and it just felt like she was trying to figure out where the story was going as she was writing the 3rd book. And I think it just could have been edited down a lot. So I just wish there was a little bit more depth to the final book, I would say. I still enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but I just think it started off great and it kind of went a little bit downhill. So going back to the Tearling series, after I finished A Conjuring of Light, I read The Invasion of the Tearling and then The Fate of the Tearling back to back. So this is book 2 and 3 of the Tearling series, and I loved it. I'm not going to gush about it too much more. The first book is definitely my favorite. The Invasion, it kind of went back and forth between some timelines and perspectives. which I wasn't expecting, and I honestly didn't like it at first, but after I got used to it, I began to see where it was going, and I appreciated it for what it was. And then The Fate of the Tearling, I felt was the second best of the series, I think. It wrapped up pretty nicely. We got a lot of answers to a lot of questions, which is always great. The ending, though, the ending in particular has a lot of very mixed reviews on Goodreads. A lot of people say they hated the ending or it was fantastic, but the ending made me so sad. And I get that, and I agree, it's incredibly sad, but I think that it was right for where the story was going and for where the author and also our main character, Kelsey, wanted the direction of her kingdom to go. So it was sad, and like part of me was just kept hoping for something else to be figured out and for it all to be well, but it had to happen the way that it did, I think. So I know you're probably like, what is she talking about? If you've read it, you know what I mean. But yeah, I don't want to deter you from reading the series to be afraid of the ending or anything, because it was fantastic and so unique and different and fresh and original, and I highly recommend the series. You should go and read it like now. So the next book that I read was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This I gave 3 stars. It was just okay. It's a YA fantasy standalone that has to do with fae and a magical enchanted forest. It was just all right. I honestly only picked this up, 1, because it has a beautiful, beautiful cover, and 2, because it's a fantasy standalone. So I'm always attracted to short fantasy stories that I can kind of dive into, lose myself in, and then dive right back out to move on to something else. Standalones are just great like that. So I was hoping for it to really pack a punch in a small package, because it's a pretty short book. But honestly, it wasn't that great. There were a few moments where I thought the writing was beautiful and the setting was really, really rich in that the magical forest and the way that it transitioned from the different seasonal courts of the Fae. I thought that was beautiful to read about. But our main character lacked a lot of depth. Honestly, at the end of the book, I had no idea who she was. I just knew that she was really in love with this guy. And that's why I gave it 3 stars. It was just all right. I honestly skimmed through the last 50 pages, but I don't think I missed very much, honestly. It wasn't terrible. It was just okay. So the last book that I finished in January 2018 was Dreamland Burning by Jennifer Latham. So this is a tough one to describe. I read the synopsis of this book back in the last video that I posted, which was my end of the year book haul. So basically, this is a YA historical fiction / contemporary story. In that, we follow 2 different perspectives. The first perspective we follow is Rowan. She is a 17-year-old biracial girl who lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma today. And then we also follow Will, who is a teenager back in 1921 in Tulsa as well. So we get to see the Tulsa race riots through the eyes of Will, and then we also get to see the effects of the race riots through Rowan almost 100 years later. So I think this book is fantastic because it's so important. I, for one, am ashamed to say that I was unaware that the Tulsa race riots were even a thing that happened in our history. I had no idea about it at all. So I was intrigued by this book, picked it up. It also has an amazing cover, so that helped a little bit. But I was just amazed how the author was able to intertwine a perspective from the past and a perspective from modern day and create something incredibly important and impactful and just very powerful. I thought the writing wasn't perfect, but it was pretty impressive. It kept me engaged. I think the best part of this whole story, besides the fact of its general importance, was the pacing. It really kept you interested. The chapters and flipping back and forth between perspectives really helped to move the story along. So I just thought it was overall just a really great read. I gave it 4 stars and I would highly recommend it. So the next book that I wanted to mention Most of it I read in January. I did finish it in February, but I wanted to go ahead and mention it in this video because I just finished it last night. And that is Roar by Cora Carmack. Ooh, that is very shiny. So I read this mostly in January, and I got some mixed feelings about it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So before you hear my complaints, just know that I did give it 4 stars. I really liked it. There was just a lot of things about it that made me roll my eyes, and that disappointed me enough to knock it down a star. So going back a little bit, this is a young adult start to a fantasy series, and the best part about this whole book is the magic system and the way that these civilizations in this world revolve around storms. So storms, we've got twisters and hurricanes and firestorms and lightning and fog and sandstorms. All these different kinds of storms have magic. And there are some people in this world called storm hunters who go and track these storms, try to kind of harness their magic to sell them in the black markets of these different cities in this fantasy world. And then you have stormlings who have magic in their blood and are able to kind of control storms. It's just a very, very cool system. And it was unique enough to really, really capture my attention. I thought it was incredibly original and nothing I had ever read about before. So I thought that was the best part of this whole book. The writing was pretty good. My only real complaint about this was the romance. So Cora Carmack is a new adult romance writer, primarily. She wrote a bunch of romance before she wrote this, and you can definitely tell she's a romance writer because there are a lot of really steamy moments, and not so steamy that it wouldn't be classified as young adult, because it is, but you can just definitely tell that she's a romance writer. And that part wasn't really bad. It just was kind of like, oh, okay. I wasn't really looking for a romance. I'm looking for a fantasy kind of deal. But throughout the story, what really got me aggravated was the love interests. There are a couple of them, and then it kind of morphs into one. They're very physical towards our main character, Aurora, or Roar. There's a lot of descriptions of them grabbing her chin or holding her by her jaw or her neck or something like that. And even when they're supposed to be doing these actions lovingly, it doesn't seem very loving to me. They were just very rough with her and just kept holding on to her and pinning her down, and he pinned me here. I couldn't move. He grabbed my waist. He pulled me back, and it was just stop touching her so much. I don't know. That really it aggravated me to the point where I rolled my eyes on more than one occasion. But besides that, I could get past it because of the awesome, really cool magic system in the world that this is set in. So I cannot wait for the second book in the series. It's called Rage, and it comes out in May, I think. I'm pretty sure. I'll put the date down here if you're interested. But I would highly recommend this. If you can get past cringy romance that kind of borders on possessiveness, I wouldn't say I approve it. And it's not it kind of gets better towards the end as our main love interest realizes this harmful thought pattern. So I did appreciate that, but it's just know that that's there. But I think you should read it just mainly for the magic. So that's all I had to tell you as far as the books that I read. I would like to also mention, I am planning on reading the entire Bible throughout the year of 2018. And in January, I ended up reading Genesis and Exodus. So I wanted to mention that to help keep myself accountable, because by the end of February, I should definitely have finished the book of Leviticus and possibly Numbers and going into Deuteronomy. So I want to include the fact that I'm finishing my books of the Bible in my wrap-ups as well. So I've done a lot of talking. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video here. I hope you enjoyed it. I know the lighting was incredibly dark. It's a very gloomy day outside. I know you can't tell, but we're mid-afternoon. I don't know, it's just been a really cloudy day. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit later. Bye.